Nia stepped out of the car and looked up at the old mansion in Lusaka, her childhood home. The place looked even grander than she remembered. The walls shone with fresh paint, the gardens were trimmed, and the big iron gates opened as if welcoming her back. But behind the beauty, Nia felt the weight of her past. Memories of arguments, jealousy, and silent tears filled her heart. She had been away for years, working abroad, building her own life, yet stepping inside felt like stepping into old wounds that never fully healed. Her brother Chaik had sent the invitation himself. He wanted her there to meet his fiancée, Amara, and Amara's wealthy parents. Nia had agreed, though she knew Chaik never truly wished her well. Still, something inside her wanted to face him, to see how much had changed, or if anything had changed at all. The hall sparkled with luxury. Chandeliers hung high, golden frames covered the walls, and servants hurried about with trays of food and drinks. Guests were already gathering, their laughter echoing through the rooms. Nia walked in quietly, her presence unnoticed at first. She carried herself with a calm elegance, though her heart pounded with nerves. Then she saw him, Chaik, dressed sharply, standing proudly beside Amara. He greeted the guests with confidence, showing off the mansion as if it was all his. Nia's eyes softened on Amara, who looked kind and curious. But Nia knew tonight would not be just a family gathering. It would be a test of truth, pride, and hidden power. The moment Amara entered the grand living room, all eyes turned toward her. She looked stunning in her elegant dress, her parents walking proudly by her side. Chaik held her hand like a man who had already won, his chest puffed with pride. The guests clapped politely, whispering about how lucky Amara was to be marrying into such a wealthy family. Nia stood quietly near the corner, her head slightly bowed but her posture graceful. She didn't need jewels or flashy clothes to shine. There was something natural about her presence that caught people's attention, even when she wasn't trying. But Chaik noticed it too, and that annoyed him. He didn't want anyone to notice his sister. He wanted the spotlight only on himself. As Amara's eyes scanned the room, they finally landed on Nia. Before Amara could ask who she was, Chaik smirked, his voice loud enough for everyone to hear. "Ah, this is Nia, the maid of the house." A few guests chuckled, some laughed out loud, thinking it was just a joke. But Chaik's tone made it sound serious. Amara blinked in surprise, her kind eyes softening with pity as she gave Nia a small smile. The word maid hung heavy in the air, echoing like an insult that could not be taken back. Nia's heart clenched. The humiliation was sharp like a knife. She felt heat rise in her chest, but on the outside she remained calm. Her lips curved into a faint, polite smile as if the words didn't affect her. Inside, however, memories of her struggles, her sacrifices, and her hard work abroad came rushing back. She wanted to scream the truth, that she was not the maid, that the mansion was hers, that every chandelier above them had been bought by her sweat and pain. But she stayed quiet. Her silence made some guests uncomfortable. They looked at her with curiosity. Something about the way she carried herself didn't match the label maid. She was too composed, too confident. Even Amara tilted her head, studying her with a puzzled expression. Chaik, thinking he had won, wrapped his arm around Amara and laughed. "Don't mind her. She just helps around here. Focus on us, my love." His words were dripping with pride, but also insecurity. He wanted to bury Nia's presence, to make her invisible. Nia, however, refused to disappear. She stood straighter, her eyes calm, her silence louder than Chaik's laughter. She didn't need to fight yet. She knew the time for truth would come, and when it did, every person in that room would remember this moment, the moment Chaik tried to bury her with lies. Amara gave Nia one last glance before turning back to the crowd, but the look in her eyes showed she wasn't convinced. Deep down, she felt there was more to Nia than what Chaik had just said, and that curiosity would only grow stronger as the night unfolded. The evening carried on with music, laughter, and clinking glasses, but for Nia, every moment felt heavier than the last. Chaik and his friends had made her the target of their entertainment. They treated her not as a sister but as if she truly were the maid Chaik had called her. One of his friends smirked and waved at her. "Hey, bring us some drinks, will you?" His voice was sharp, almost commanding, as if she had no choice but to obey. Another leaned back in his chair, pointing to the table. "The plates are messy. Clean this up quickly. You don't want the guests to sit in a dirty place, do you?" Laughter followed, echoing through the hall like cruel music. Nia's hands tightened at her side, but she didn't lose her calm. With a quiet dignity, she picked up the empty glasses, her movements graceful, her eyes steady. Every step she took carried an elegance that didn't belong to someone in servitude. Even while humiliated, she looked like a woman of power in disguise. Some of the guests chuckled, whispering among themselves. They believed Chaik's words, thinking Nia was just another servant hidden in the shadows of the wealthy. But a few others exchanged confused glances. There was something in the way she walked, the way she held her head high, that didn't make sense. Amara noticed it too. She watched Nia closely, her brows furrowed in curiosity. Why does she carry herself like this? She wondered. A maid should look shy, nervous, and small, but Nia radiated quiet strength. Even as Chaik's friends mocked her, she didn't look broken. She looked untouchable. Chaik, however, enjoyed the game too much to stop. He leaned toward Amara, whispering loudly enough for others to hear. "She's been here forever. Can't do much else. My parents pitied her, so she just helps around the house." His words dripped with arrogance, meant to bury Nia further under shame. Some laughed again, clinking their glasses, treating it all like a performance. Inside, Nia's chest burned. Every insult reminded her of the years she had spent alone, far from home, working day and night to build a life. She thought of the nights she cried quietly, the sacrifices she made, the money she saved, only to come back and be called a maid in her own house. But still, she refused to let her emotions explode. She had learned long ago that silence could cut deeper than words. So she continued serving, but each movement carried a message. "I am not what you think I am. And soon you will know the truth." Amara's eyes followed her with growing suspicion. The grace, the poise, the calm, it didn't add up. Something told her that Chaik was hiding a truth far bigger than his pride allowed. And as the night wore on, that truth was only getting closer to the surface. Nia moved through the evening like a shadow, quiet but impossible to ignore. Every time someone called her help, every time Chaik's friends snapped their fingers for her to pour another drink or pick up a plate, she felt the sting. But instead of showing anger, she held her head high. Her silence was not weakness, it was strength. Inside her heart, memories came rushing back. She remembered the nights she worked double shifts in a foreign land, scrubbing floors, washing dishes, saving every coin she could. She remembered the long hours with little sleep, the loneliness of being away from family, and the tears she shed quietly in a small rented room. All those years, she told herself she was building something bigger. She was sacrificing her youth, her comfort, and her peace for a future that no one else believed in. And now, here she was, standing inside the very house that bore her name on its deeds. The walls, the chandeliers, the marble floors, every piece of it was tied to her sweat and her sacrifices. Yet no one in the room knew it. To them, she was just the maid. To her brother, she was an easy target for mockery. But Nia didn't flinch. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't reveal her truth. She had learned that timing mattered. Power wasn't always about speaking. Sometimes it was about waiting for the right moment to let the truth break free on its own. As Chaik laughed with his friends, boasting about his future, Nia stood gracefully in the corner, her eyes steady. She let them humiliate her because she knew the humiliation wouldn't last. She carried the weight of her past like armor. Every cruel word was a reminder of how far she had come. They thought they were breaking her down, but in reality, they were sharpening her strength. Some of the guests started to notice. One woman whispered to another, "She doesn't look like a maid. Look at how she walks, how she looks at people." Another nodded, confused by the calm dignity Nia carried. The whispers grew, small sparks of doubt among the laughter. Amara especially could not look away. She saw the quiet fire in Nia's eyes. It was not the gaze of a servant, it was the gaze of someone who knew her worth but chose silence. That silence unsettled Amara, because it spoke louder than any words could. Nia's heart beat steadily, her mind calm. She thought to herself, let them laugh, let them mock me. The truth is patient, and when it comes, it will silence them all. And so she endured, not with anger, not with tears, but with the silent strength of a woman who had already fought her hardest battles and had nothing left to prove, except the moment when the truth would shine on its own. As the night grew quieter, the music softened and some of the guests drifted toward the gardens. Amara slipped away from Chaik's side, her eyes searching until they found Nia standing near the balcony, looking out at the stars. There was something about her presence that pulled Amara closer, something she couldn't ignore. Amara approached gently, her voice low. "Can I ask you something?" Nia turned and gave her a small, calm smile. "Of course." Amara hesitated, then spoke honestly. "Why do you let him treat you like this? He introduces you as a maid, makes you serve, lets his friends mock you. Anyone else would have shouted back or walked away. But you just stand there calm like none of it matters." For a moment Nia's eyes softened. She didn't answer right away. She just breathed in deeply, her gaze steady, her posture graceful as ever. Then with a faint smile she said quietly, "Sometimes silence is louder than words." Amara frowned slightly, trying to understand. "But doesn't it hurt? Doesn't it feel unfair?" Nia's smile deepened, but there was sadness in her eyes. "Of course it hurts. But hurt is not weakness. I've learned that when people are cruel, they're only revealing who they are, not who you are. If I argue, if I fight, I only lower myself to their level. Silence has its own power, and the right moment always comes to speak." Amara felt a shiver run through her. The way Nia spoke, with such calmness and quiet strength, didn't match the picture Chaik had painted of her. This wasn't a maid. This was a woman who carried something deeper, something untold. She studied Nia carefully, the way her chin lifted with dignity, the way her eyes didn't waver. Amara felt unsettled, not because Nia frightened her, but because she sensed a truth hidden behind her silence. "You're not what he says you are," Amara whispered, almost to herself. Nia didn't reply to that. She only turned her gaze back toward the stars, her silence speaking more than words could. The quiet between them stretched, but it wasn't uncomfortable. It was heavy, powerful, filled with things Amara couldn't yet understand. In that moment, Amara realized there was a storm waiting beneath the surface of this house. Chaik's arrogance, his pride, his lies. They were fragile compared to the strength Nia carried in her silence. Amara's heart beat faster as she thought of the future. She was about to marry into this family, but something told her she had only seen the surface of it. The truth was close, and when it came out it would change everything. She gave Nia one last thoughtful look before walking back inside, and as she rejoined Chaik, she couldn't help but feel that her fiancé's greatest mistake wasn't humiliating Nia, it was underestimating her. The long dining table was set like a scene from a royal feast. Silver cutlery shone under the golden lights, crystal glasses sparkled, and the smell of rich Zambian dishes filled the room. Guests laughed and chatted, but beneath the surface, tension moved like an invisible current. Nia sat quietly at the far end of the table, her presence almost hidden, while Chaik claimed the head seat with Amara by his side. He leaned back proudly, his voice booming across the table as he began his favorite game, boasting. "My wedding," he announced, lifting his glass, "will be the biggest this city has ever seen. We will invite politicians, business leaders, even celebrities. Everyone will know that Amara chose the right man." The guests clapped politely, though some exchanged small smiles, sensing his arrogance. Nia lowered her eyes, her lips pressed together, but inside every word pierced her like a knife. Chaik wasn't finished. He waved his hand toward the glittering chandelier above. "This house," he said loudly, "is just the beginning. Soon everything will be mine, the estates, the lands, the businesses. My sister," he smirked, "she should be grateful I let her stay here and have food to eat." Some guests chuckled, others shifted uncomfortably. Amara's parents looked uneasy, but they stayed silent. Amara, however, glanced quickly toward Nia. She saw no shame in her eyes, no anger, just quiet strength, the same strength that had unsettled her earlier. Nia picked at her food slowly, her mind calm despite the humiliation. Every insult reminded her of why she had returned, to finally face this moment. She thought of the years abroad, the sacrifices she made, and the truth waiting to be revealed. The papers were ready, the evidence undeniable. She only had to wait for the right time. Chaik raised his voice again, his words dripping with pride. Amara is lucky. She is marrying into a family of wealth and power. Not everyone gets this chance. He looked around the table, making sure everyone heard. This mansion will one day belong to us. Our children will inherit it, not anyone else. His eyes flicked toward Nia, sharp and mocking. The words cut deep, but Nia stayed still. She lifted her glass of water, her hand steady, her face unreadable. Her silence was beginning to speak louder than Chaik's arrogance. A few guests noticed it too, how she didn't flinch, how her calmness seemed stronger than his pride. Amara shifted uncomfortably in her seat. She looked at her fiancé, then back at Nia, her mind full of questions. Something about this dinner felt wrong. The boasting, the cruelty, the strange dignity of the woman Chaik kept calling the maid. It didn't add up. As the night moved on, the room filled with laughter and false cheer. But under the glitter and pride, the tension grew heavier. And though Chaik believed he was winning the night, Nia knew the moment of truth was drawing closer, closer than he could ever imagine. Glasses clinked as Chaik stood tall at the head of the table, his smile wide and his voice full of pride. He lifted his wine and declared loudly, "To my future, to my wedding, and to the life of wealth that awaits me." Guests clapped, some forced, some genuine, while Chaik basked in the attention like a king on his throne. But before he could take a sip, the heavy double doors of the dining hall opened with a slow creak. The sound silenced the room. Heads turned, laughter stopped, and the air grew thick with curiosity. A man in a crisp suit walked in, holding a brown leather folder pressed tightly under his arm. His steps were confident, his expression calm. "Good evening," the man said with authority, his voice carrying across the hall. He didn't look at Chaik first. Instead, he turned to Nia and gave a small bow of respect. "Ms. Nia, forgive me for arriving late." The guests froze. Some frowned, confused. "Ms. Nia." The word rolled through the room like thunder. Amara leaned forward in her seat, her eyes flicking between Nia and the stranger. Chaik's smirk faltered. "What is this?" Chaik demanded, his tone sharp. "Who are you?" The man adjusted his glasses and replied evenly. "My name is Mr. Bonda. I am a lawyer representing Ms. Nia." He said her name with clear respect, not like a servant, but like a woman of importance. A ripple of whispers spread around the table. Some guests exchanged wide-eyed glances. Amara's parents straightened in their seats, sensing that something was about to change. Chaik laughed nervously, trying to regain control. "You must be mistaken. This is the maid of the house. She doesn't need a lawyer." Mr. Bonda didn't flinch. He calmly set the leather folder on the table, right in front of Nia. "With all due respect, sir, you are very mistaken. I am here on her request, and what I carry will clear every doubt in this room." All eyes turned to Nia. She hadn't moved much. Only her lips curved into the smallest, calmest smile. Her hands rested lightly on the table, her composure unshaken. The silence was heavy now. Even the clinking of plates and glasses had stopped. Amara's eyes widened, her heart racing as she studied Nia's expression. Something inside her whispered that this was the moment she had been waiting for. Chaik's face hardened, anger flickering in his eyes. "Nia," he said through clenched teeth, "what nonsense is this?" But Nia did not answer him. She only looked at Mr. Bonda and gave him a small nod. That nod was enough. It was the signal that the truth, buried for too long, was finally about to rise. And in that tense silence, with every guest holding their breath, the balance of power in the mansion began to shift. The room was silent, the kind of silence that made every heartbeat sound louder. All eyes were fixed on the lawyer as he carefully opened the leather folder. His hands moved with calm confidence, as though he knew the weight of what he was about to say. He cleared his throat and spoke in a clear, steady voice. "According to legal documents, This mansion and all its surrounding estates belong to Ms. Nia. The words hit the room like thunder. Gasps escaped from nearly every guest. Forks dropped against plates, and whispers erupted immediately. All eyes turned toward Nia, who sat quietly, her face calm but her eyes shining with quiet strength. Chaik's smirk vanished instantly. He blinked, his jaw tightening as he forced out a laugh. What nonsense is this? This is my house, our family house. Mr. Bonda, the lawyer, didn't even look shaken. He pulled out the official papers, thick with seals and signatures, and placed them on the table for all to see. Here are the deeds, signed and verified. Ownership was transferred years ago. Every legal record recognizes Ms. Nia as the rightful owner. Gasps grew louder. Some guests leaned closer, craning their necks to see the documents. Others covered their mouths in shock. A woman whispered, "She's not the maid. She owns everything." The word spread quickly like fire catching dry grass. Amara's eyes widened, her hands gripping the edge of the table. She turned slowly toward Nia, her heart racing. The woman she had pitied all evening, the one she thought was a servant, was the true owner of the mansion. For a moment, Amara couldn't breathe. The truth was too heavy, too unbelievable, yet right there in front of her. Chaik tried to speak again, his voice shaking this time. "No, this cannot be true. She doesn't have the money, she doesn't have the power. She is nothing." His words cracked, and his arrogance began to crumble in front of everyone. Nia finally lifted her eyes and looked at him. She didn't need to shout or argue. Her silence, paired with the papers on the table, said everything. The guests who had laughed at her earlier now stared with awe and shame. Some avoided her gaze, embarrassed for how they had treated her. Others whispered among themselves, admiring the way she had carried herself with such dignity. Amara's parents exchanged sharp glances, clearly unsettled. This was not the story they had been told about Chaik's family. Amara, still in shock, whispered under her breath, "All this time, it was her." Chaik's hands trembled as he slammed his palm on the table, but no one took him seriously anymore. His power was gone, stripped away by the truth. And in that moment, Nia sat straighter, not with arrogance, but with the quiet grace of someone who had finally been seen for who she truly was. The real owner, the real strength, the true heart of the mansion. For a long moment after the lawyer's words, the room was frozen. Everyone sat in stunned silence, their eyes shifting between the documents on the table and Nia's calm face. Then, slowly, Nia rose from her seat. Her movements were graceful, steady, and full of quiet power. She looked straight at Chaik, her voice soft but carrying across the room. "You called me the maid, but this maid owns the keys to every door in this house." The room erupted instantly. Guests gasped, whispers spread like wildfire. Some covered their mouths, others leaned in closer, eager not to miss a single word. The humiliation that had once been aimed at Nia now turned like a sharp blade against Chaik. Chaik's face turned pale, then red. "Lies!" he shouted, slamming his fist on the table. "All of it lies. She's trying to embarrass me in front of you all." But the lawyer calmly slid the papers closer to the center of the table. Thick signatures, official stamps, and seals gleamed under the chandelier. No one could question them. The documents spoke louder than Chaik's anger. "Everything has been verified," the lawyer said firmly. "Ownership belongs to Ms. Nia. Legally, this estate is hers." The room buzzed with whispers. "She owns everything," one guest muttered. All this time, she was the true heir. Amara sat frozen, her wide eyes fixed on Nia, then shifting to Chaik. She replayed the evening in her mind. The arrogance, the boasting, the cruel way he had introduced his own sister as a maid. Her stomach turned with disgust. The man she thought was strong and proud was nothing but a liar hiding behind false wealth. "Chaik," Amara said softly, her voice trembling with anger. You knew this house wasn't yours." Chaik stuttered, reaching for her hand, but she pulled it back sharply. The shame on his face deepened as he realized his carefully built image was falling apart in front of everyone. Meanwhile, Nia's calm presence grew brighter. She didn't raise her voice, she didn't boast. she simply let the truth shine through. Respect, she said quietly, is not given by mocking others. Respect is earned, and no lie can take it away from me. Guests who had once laughed at her now looked at her with admiration. Some even nodded, whispering to each other about her strength. The shift in the room was clear. Nia was no longer invisible. She was the center of it all. Amara turned fully to Nia, her face full of regret and shame. "I'm so sorry," she whispered. Nia gave her a small, forgiving smile, but her eyes remained fixed on Chaik. And in that moment it was clear. The tables had turned. Chaik was no longer the proud heir he pretended to be. He was exposed, stripped of his lies. Nia, once humiliated, now stood tall as the true queen of the house. The dining hall was still buzzing with whispers when Nia slowly rose to her feet. Her eyes glistened with tears, but her voice came out steady, clear and strong. She looked at the faces around her, the same faces that had laughed at her earlier, and said, "Respect is earned, not forced. And truth always speaks louder than lies." For a moment the room was silent. Then, as her words sank in, the guests began to clap. The sound grew louder, filling the hall with thunderous applause. Some even stood to honor her strength. The same people who had once mocked her were now moved, touched by her dignity. Amara pushed her chair back and walked to Nia's side. Her eyes were wet, her heart heavy with guilt, but her steps were firm. She placed her hand gently on Nia's arm as if to say, "I believe you. I stand with you." Her gesture spoke louder than words, and the crowd noticed. The image of Chaik and Amara as a couple shattered in that instant. Chaik sat frozen in his chair, his pride crushed, his face pale with shame. No one was laughing with him anymore. No one even looked at him the same way. He was no longer the confident heir. He was simply a man exposed by his own lies. By the end of the night, the story had changed completely. Nia was no longer the maid everyone mocked. She was the woman who had carried herself with unshakable grace until the truth revealed her power. She was no longer in the shadows. She stood tall, admired and respected. That night, Nia became the queen of her own story.